Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Speak Up with me. I'm Emma.
And I'm Jake. Today's episode is for anyone learning English who feels stuck translating everything in their head before they speak. We're calling it Stop Translating, Start Speaking.
This is such an important topic. I think almost every language learner goes through this stage.
Definitely. So let's talk about why it happens, why it slows you down, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it.
Why we translate in our heads. Jake, let's start with the basics. Why do people translate in their heads in the first place?
It's actually very natural. When you're learning a new language, your brain doesn't have a direct connection yet between an idea and the English word for it. So instead, it goes through a longer path. Idea, then native language word, then translation, then English word.
Right, and that path takes time. So by the time you've translated the sentence in your head, the conversation has already moved on.
Exactly. And there's something else going on too. A lot of learners are afraid of making mistakes, so they translate carefully in their head first, trying to build a correct sentence before saying anything out loud.
That makes sense, but it also creates a problem, doesn't it? Because real conversations don't wait.
Right. If someone asks you a question and you spend 5 or 6 seconds translating a perfect sentence, the moment has already passed. Conversation partners might think you didn't understand, or they might just move on to a new topic.
So translating isn't just slow, it can actually make communication harder, not easier.
Exactly. It's a very understandable habit, but it's also one of the biggest things that holds learners back from speaking naturally. Part 2. The problem with word-for-word translation.
Let's talk about something specific. Word-for-word translation. This is when someone translates a sentence directly, word by word, from their own language into English.
This causes so many strange, unnatural sentences. For example, in some languages, people literally say something like, I have hunger, instead of, I'm hungry.
Right. Or in some languages, how do you call this, instead of, what do you call this?
Exactly. These sentences aren't necessarily wrong grammatically, in a simple sense, but they sound strange to a native English speaker because English has its own natural patterns that don't always match other languages.
This is actually why memorizing vocabulary lists isn't always enough. You can know every individual word in a sentence, but if you build the sentence using your native language's structure, it still won't sound like natural English.
That's such a good point. Language isn't just a list of words, it's a whole system of patterns, and every language organizes ideas a little differently.
So the goal isn't to translate better. The goal is to slowly build new patterns directly in English, so you don't need translation as a middle step at all.
Exactly. And that brings us to the real question. How do you actually do that? Part 3. Practical ways to stop translating.
All right, let's get practical. Jake, what's the first thing you'd recommend to someone who wants to stop translating in their head?
The first thing is what's often called thinking in English. It sounds abstract, but it's actually a simple daily habit. Throughout your day, try describing things around you directly in English, in your head, without going through your native language at all.
So, for example, if you're making coffee, you might think, I'm pouring the water. The coffee smells really strong today.
Exactly. It doesn't have to be complicated. Simple, present moment descriptions are perfect for building this habit.
I also think using very simple, common phrases as your first automatic reactions helps a lot. Instead of translating, I don't know, carefully in your head, you just want that phrase to become automatic, something you don't even have to think about.
Right, and that comes from repetition, not translation. The more times you hear and use a phrase in the right situation, the faster it becomes automatic. without needing to translate it at all.
Here's another helpful tip. Focus on meaning, not perfect grammar, especially in the beginning of a conversation. A lot of learners freeze because they're trying to build a perfect sentence in their head before speaking.
That's such an important point. Native speakers make small grammar mistakes all the time too. Communication is about being understood, not about being perfect.
Exactly. If you focus too much on perfect grammar, you end up translating carefully, which slows everything down. But if you focus on just getting your meaning across, you speak faster and more naturally, even with small mistakes.
Another really useful technique is called shadowing. This means listening to a native speaker in a podcast, a movie, or a video and repeating what they say almost at the same time, copying their rhythm, pronunciation, and natural phrases.
Shadowing is great because it trains your mouth and your brain to produce English sounds and patterns directly, without any translation step at all.
Right, you're not thinking about grammar rules while shadowing, you're just copying natural sound patterns, the same way a young child learns their first language.
Speaking of children, that's actually a helpful comparison. Children don't translate. They connect words directly to meaning through repetition and context, not through grammar rules.
Exactly. And while adults obviously learn differently in some ways, that direct connection between meaning and language, without translation in the middle, is still the real goal. Part 4. Building confidence to speak without translating.
Let's talk about confidence for a moment, because I think fear plays a huge role in this whole translation habit.
Absolutely. A lot of learners translate carefully because they're scared of sounding silly or making an embarrassing mistake.
Right, but here's something important to remember. Native speakers are almost always incredibly forgiving of small mistakes, especially if the overall meaning is clear.
In fact, most native speakers are impressed that someone is speaking a second language at all. They're usually not analysing every small grammar mistake. They're just trying to understand you and have a normal conversation.
That's such an important mindset shift. Instead of thinking, I need to say this perfectly, try thinking, I just need to be understood right now.
Exactly. And the more you practice speaking quickly, even imperfectly, the more natural and automatic your English becomes over time.
One more tip, try having very short, low-pressure conversations regularly, even just a few minutes at a time, with a language partner, a tutor, or even talking to yourself out loud.
Talking to yourself might sound strange, but it's actually a great way to practice speaking without any pressure or fear of judgment at all.
Exactly. The goal is simply repetition, without the fear of making mistakes getting in the way.
And slowly, over time, that careful translation step in your head becomes shorter and shorter, until eventually, for many everyday phrases, it disappears completely. Part 5. A short story. Learning to let go of translation.
Before we wrap up, let me share a short story about this. A friend of mine moved to London for work a few years ago, and English was her second language.
How did she experience this whole translation problem?
In the beginning, she told me she felt like there was a small delay in every single conversation. She would hear a question, translate it in her head, build an answer in her native language, translate that answer into English, and then finally speak, all in just a few seconds. But it felt exhausting every single time.
That sounds mentally tiring, honestly.
It really was. But after a few months of forcing herself to answer quickly, even with mistakes, something changed. She told me that one day, in a work meeting, she suddenly realised she had been speaking for 5 minutes straight, in English, without translating a single sentence in her head.
That must have felt like such a huge moment for her.
She said it felt like a small breakthrough. It didn't happen overnight. It took consistent daily practice and a lot of patience with herself. But eventually, English started to feel like her own language too, not just a translated version of her first one.
That's such a great example of exactly what we've been talking about today. It's not an instant switch, it's a gradual shift through practice and repetition.
Exactly. And that shift is available to absolutely anyone learning a language with enough consistent practice.
Quick listening check. All right, before we finish, let's do a quick listening check.
Question 1. What is the term for listening to a native speaker and repeating what they say at almost the same time?
Shadowing.
Question 2. According to Jake, what should you focus on more than perfect grammar, especially early in a conversation?
Meaning, getting your message across, rather than being perfectly grammatically correct.
And question 3. In Emma's story, what happened one day in her friend's work meeting?
She realized she'd been speaking English for 5 minutes without translating anything in her head.
Perfect if you remembered all 3 of those. Outro.
That's all for today's episode of Everyday Voices. We talked about why we translate in our heads, the problems with word-for-word translation, practical techniques like thinking in English and shadowing, and how to build the confidence to just speak, even imperfectly.
If you take away just one thing from today, let it be this. Meaning matters more than perfection. The more you speak, even with small mistakes, the faster that translation habit fades away.
Thanks so much for listening, everyone.
See you next time. Bye for now.